in this area. How do I solve this problem? And I think, gut it out. Just make it down there. And so I keep driving. I make it to San Diego. I'm sweating like crazy. I can barely eat. But do I go to the hospital? No. Why? Because I really wanted to go to this conference and meet these guys. And so I think to myself, by noon tomorrow, if I can just meet them, I'll get the contact made and I'll go straight to the hospital, I promise. And so I have a horrible night. I have these things I'd never had before or since called fever dreams, where I think my fever was so high I was hallucinating the whole night. So it's like you're dreaming, but you're not sleeping. And so I just wake up feeling completely wrecked. I go to my first session, and because it's a playwriting conference, they have a little sketch comedy thing going. The first sketch, I've been talking to my friends next to me, and I've been saying, I feel kind of sick, I wonder what I have. And they're saying this. The first sketch is about a guy who's being operated on for appendicitis at this conference. And this woman leans over to me and says, that's what you have. She's beating on my shoulders. You have appendicitis. And I think, is that bad? She says, it's really bad. And it's like, she says, how long have you had it? I said, 4 days or so. She says, 4 days? You got to go to the hospital. I say, right after lunch. I got to meet these guys. And so I go. I meet the guys. There's a gang of people mobbing this one guy. He's kind of a celebrity there. And I can't meet him. So finally, I shout at the top of my lungs, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. So sorry to interrupt you. I really wanted to meet you. Here's my card. I'm going to be moving to the East Coast. I don't mean to cut in line against everybody else, but I'm feeling really sick and I got to go to the hospital now. Bye. I go to the hospital. Doctor examines me. He says, with total contempt, dripping from his voice, he says, what do you think's wrong with you? I said, well, this morning I began wondering if I have appendicitis. He says, that's partly right. I think you do have appendicitis, but you don't actually have just appendicitis. I don't have just appendicitis. What do you think I have? He says, from what you describe and from my examination, I think you have a ruptured appendix. He says, you know what that means? I said, doesn't sound good. He says, a ruptured appendix means your appendix is blown up. And all this poison spreads through your body, through your chest cavity, through your gut. Do you know how long the average person is supposed to live with a ruptured appendix? 2 days. It would kill you. Do you know how long I think you've had a ruptured appendix? 4 days. You should have been dead 2 days ago. Why didn't you go to a doctor? Say, well, there was this conference I really wanted to go to, this guy I really wanted to meet. And so then suddenly I'm just filled with pain. I've just been somehow psychologically holding the pain back, and now I just suddenly feel like, oh God, there's a worse pain on earth than this. I can't imagine what it is. I just felt horrible. And then it becomes kind of a Keystone Cops routine. I pick up the phone to call Grace back in San Francisco. I get our answering machine, and when she comes home, this is the message she hears. Grace, it's Dave. I'm in San Diego. I met the guy. That's good. Remember how I was feeling kind of bad? You know, it turned out, who knew, I had a ruptured appendix. Can't talk more. Paid too great. Click. And suddenly I'm thinking to myself, I could be dead by the time I see her again, as it were. And I'm thinking, and they can't find a surgeon. They thought they had one that they could get right away. They can't find him. They're running around like crazy. He's not available. They're trying to find me enough pain medication to deal with the pain. They can't find the pain medication that'll deal with it. And so suddenly my head is swimming, and I think, people talked that memorizing the Bible was a good idea. I should have done that. But even I can memorize. I'd memorized probably 2 famous parts of the Bible, and that was it. The most famous parts maybe in the Old and New Testaments. So if the New Testament most famous thing is the Lord's Prayer, the Old Testament's most famous thing might be the 23rd Psalm. And so I went for that one. I'm thinking, the Lord is my shepherd. And I started just reciting it. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. And then we go on to, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And I feel instantly better. I suddenly felt I'd been just filled with anxiety, and suddenly I felt great. I thought, I'm not worried about me, because this is true. And if I die today, there is a table prepared before me in the presence of there's a feast waiting for me. And I started praying for Grace, because I thought, she's going to be pissed. Let's not kid ourselves. We've been married. She'll be a widow at 26, and that she will not be happy that I didn't go to the doctor. She'll have issues to work through if I die today. And but what was so encouraging is I thought, I've been pursuing this God stuff, this Jesus stuff. Evidently, I believe it. It's come down to the point where I'm at that life and death moment, and it seems true. Well, that all strikes me as the baseline gift of the Holy Spirit. that you have a greater intimacy with an experience of God. You know in your inner self at key moments that God's with you. That said, let's talk a bit about the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit might best be described as supernatural help with our character, changing kind of what we're like as people. So the most famous passage about that will be on the screen here. It's from Galatians chapter 5, and it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." Now, when I first read those struck me as kind of greeting card sentiments. Of course, be loving, be kind, be gentle, be self-controlled. And who on earth doesn't regard themselves as loving? Even if they're the worst person on earth from our point of view, inside they feel like they're a good friend, you know. Everybody feels that way. But as I began studying this and experiencing this, I thought, oh, this is actually supernatural kind of charging of those things. So I think of something like love. I think all these things to me boil down to some sense of overflow. A sense that we'll have more than we need, more resourcing than we could have on our own, which makes some sense, right? Because it's the human condition to be limited. The problem with love is we all want to be loving, of course, but anybody who's been in a good friendship, certainly in a marriage, discovers being consistently loving day in and day out to people who are trying their best but who have their own issues, their own problems, their own things that trigger things in you, you run dry. You just do. When I first was proposed that I lead a church, I planned to be a playwright. I wasn't planning to lead any church or faith community in Boston. I wasn't planning to do it. But when it got suggested because the person who was going to do it quit. And I had a background in this sort of stuff, and people said, "Do you want to do it?" One of my first thoughts was, I'm kind of an introvert by temperament. I'm not gushy, I'm not extroverted, I don't get energy from being with people. It kind of drains energy from me to be with people. I thought, I don't have it in me to suddenly care about all these people's issues and problems and things like that. It will overwhelm me. And even the idea of greeting people, after services on a given Sunday, which I'd seen pastors do, just struck me as overwhelming. Saying all that, it would be so draining. I would have to go and just be comatose after that. And I felt like what God said was, that's the fruit of the Spirit, Dave. I will give you what you need. I will give you overflow. I will give you love. That's my job. It's not your job. And I found that to be true. I have more than I ever could have expected. So love. Joy. Again, joy, I think, is almost the essence of overflow. Joy is that sense that you have more than you expected out of life. And it's often contrasted with happiness. Happiness famously is from, I think, is it a Gaelic word, hap, which is circumstance. And joy is just this thing which comes even in hard times. Many of us, actually, I have a close friend who's been going through an extraordinarily hard time recently. And I was having a conversation last week in the midst of this, of his description of how he's found joy in it. And it was surprising. He was doing bad. He wasn't feeling that encouraging. And suddenly he found joy. Well, there you go. Are his circumstances happy? No, but there was a joy there. It's a fruit of the Spirit. It's a gift of the Holy Spirit in good times or in bad times that we can get some contact with the joy of God, the joy from the inside. That seems like a pretty profound gift of the fruit of the Spirit. Peace, similar thing. Could be either internal peace, that things are going to be okay. That's a pretty important thing to have. Or maybe it's peace relationally, that we have some peace in connection with other people that we couldn't otherwise have had. I'm not sure, but that's the spirit of it. Patience, we can hang with people a bit more. Kindness, that's I think what I felt from this guy who was such a big man on campus. Something I felt after a few years, I thought, you know what he seems is something I never would have thought of him as, kind. He didn't seem kind, he seemed cool. And being cool is great. I wish I were cool. I still aspire to being cool. But being cool is not quite the same as being kind, right? Those are kind of different virtues, if they are virtues. And he was now kind. And I thought, well, maybe it's just the fruit of the Spirit. Maybe it's not just that I know him better. Maybe he's now known Jesus enough that we're really seeing changes in who he is, or so it seemed to me. And I could go on through the rest of them as well. Goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. One of the more interesting ones to me is self-control. That doesn't seem like the same sort of thing. It seems like a different thing. Self-control, right, is you don't do that thing you really want to do but you know is bad for you. Or you do that thing you don't want to do but you know would be good for you. And that's the human condition, right? Which of us really has self-control? There's the occasional really disciplined person, but even really disciplined people, they're disciplined in some areas of their lives, usually. They've mastered their work habits or they've mastered their exercise habits. But it's the rare person who's just self-controlled, period. And it strikes me as a great gift, but seriously, does that happen to anybody? And I will say, as I've seen people grow in God, and as I've seen myself hopefully grow a little bit more in God, oh man, I wish I exercised more, and I wish I ate better, and I wish I did all sorts of stuff. On the other hand, what I've seen is that increasingly things that would have been triggers for me just to do destructive things lose power. there is truth to that. It's not the whole package, but I've seen at least some pretty profound beginnings of that have been encouraging, and I hear that a fair amount. So the fruit of the Spirit. The gifts of the Spirit. This would correlate with my Phil story, these kind of wacky, amazing things. These, rather than being supernatural help with our character, might best be described as things we can give to other people that come directly from God. Let me read you a passage about those that will give you a feel for it. This is from that first chapter of 1 Corinthians that I mentioned last time, that I went and knocked on my friend's door and I said, what do you make of this? Well, this was one of the passages I didn't know what to make of. A spiritual gift is given to each of us so we can help each other. There you go. A gift given to help other